Ambassador Jaden fiddled nervously with his collar as he waited in the gleaming corridor of the neutral space station. The intricate metallic designs on the walls pulsed with an ethereal blue light that seemed to follow his movements. Around him, the Arielum royal guards stood at attention, their crystalline armor catching the ambient light and scattering it in mesmerizing patterns. Each guard's face remained impassive, but their third eyes tracked his every twitch and adjustment. "Ambassador, please remain calm," whispered Arya, his AI assistant, through the nearly invisible earpiece. "Your heart rate is elevated. The Arielum can sense electromagnetic changes in biological beings." "That's not helping, Arya," Jaden muttered, straightening the diplomatic pin on his chest. It had been 3 months since Earth had received the communication from the Arielum Empire, expressing interest in trade negotiations. 3 months of frantic preparation, cultural briefings, and diplomatic protocol drills. Now, Jaden was about to become the first human to meet Queen Valteria face to face. The grand doors at the end of the hall slid open silently, revealing a vast chamber with a ceiling that seemed to disappear into infinity, dotted with what looked like actual stars. A regal attendant with silvery skin gestured for Jaden to enter. "Her Majesty, Queen Valteria of the 7th Dynasty, sovereign of the Arielum Empire, guardian of the 13 systems, awaits you," the attendant announced, voice resonating with an otherworldly echo. Jaden swallowed hard and stepped forward, clutching the diplomatic gift. A box containing Earth's finest coffee beans, chocolate, and a small vial of Pacific Ocean water. Items that the cultural analysts had suggested might intrigue the alien queen. The chamber was even more impressive from the inside. A semicircle of alien dignitaries lined the path to the throne, each wearing elaborate ceremonial attire that seemed to shift and change as if alive. At the center, elevated on a platform of what appeared to be liquid metal frozen in time, sat Queen Valteria. She was not what Jaden had expected. The briefings had described the Arielum as humanoid, but seeing her in person was different. Her skin had a faint luminescence, like moonlight trapped beneath ice. Her eyes, all 3 of them, were the color of a nebula, swirling with purples and blues. But most striking was her hair, or what humans might call hair, a crown of crystalline appendages that extended from her scalp and changed color subtly with her movements, currently a cool, assessing blue. Ambassador Jaden of Earth. Her voice was melodic but commanding, each word precisely enunciated. "You cross vast distances to stand before us. Speak your purpose." Jaden bowed deeply, as instructed. "Your Majesty, I bring greetings from Earth and the United Planetary Coalition. We are honored by this opportunity for dialogue between our peoples." He approached with measured steps and presented the gift box with outstretched arms. A slender attendant took it and brought it to the queen, who examined it with a curious tilt of her head, causing her crystalline crown to shift from blue to a faint violet. "Biological samples?" she inquired, one elegant eyebrow raised. "Cultural exchanges, Your Majesty. Coffee and chocolate, consumables that are highly valued on Earth, and water from our largest ocean, which covers most of our planet." The queen's lips curved slightly. "How quaint. We shall have our xenobiologists examine them." She handed the box to another attendant, who spirited it away. "Now, to matters of substance. What does Earth seek from the Arielum?" This was the moment Jaden had prepared for. He straightened his shoulders. "Your Majesty, Earth proposes a peaceful trade alliance. We offer medical knowledge, agricultural techniques, and artistic exchanges. In return, we hope to learn about your sustainable energy technologies and interstellar navigation systems." The chamber remained silent for a tense moment before Queen Valteria let out a sound that might have been a scoff. "Medical knowledge? Your species has barely conquered your own cellular decay. Agricultural technique? You still rely on soil and rainfall." Her crown shifted to a deep indigo. What meaningful exchange could there be when the gap between our civilizations spans millennia? Jaden felt sweat beading on his forehead. This wasn't going according to plan. "Perhaps, Your Majesty, The gap in our technological advancement is precisely why an alliance would benefit both sides. Different perspectives can lead to innovation. Different perspectives? She interrupted, leaning forward on her throne. Your species still wages war over resources that we synthesize in laboratories. You pollute your homeworld while we have cleansed entire star systems. Her voice lowered. What could you possibly offer us that we would value? The dignitaries around the room shifted. Uncomfortably, Jaden's mind raced through his options. The trade agreement was clearly not appealing to her. Perhaps the military alliance angle? No, Earth was in no position to offer meaningful military assistance to a species that had mastered interstellar travel centuries ago. Well, Queen Valteria pressed, her crown now a vibrant red. What do you propose that would make this worth our attention? The pressure was overwhelming. Jaden's diplomatic training seemed inadequate in the face of such direct challenge. In a moment of desperate inspiration, or perhaps temporary insanity, he blurted out, "If a military alliance doesn't interest you, perhaps we could consider a diplomatic marriage instead?" The words hung in the air like an explosion frozen in time. Every aerial lum in the chamber went completely still. Jaden immediately realized his catastrophic error. That was just a figure of speech. And then something unexpected happened. Queen Valteria laughed. It wasn't a polite chuckle or a diplomatic courtesy. It was a genuine laugh that seemed to ripple through the chamber like a wave. The crystalline crown on her head flashed through a rainbow of colors before settling on a warm gold. The dignitaries looked at each other in apparent shock, some even taking small steps backward. "Wait, was that an offer?" she asked, her nebula eyes sparkling with what could only be described as amusement. Before Jaden could clarify that it absolutely was not, she continued, "All right, I accept. This marriage proposal shall initiate the binding trial between our species." Jaden's mouth fell open. "Your Majesty, I didn't mean to." "It is decided," she declared, rising from her throne in one fluid motion. Standing, she was nearly 7 feet tall, towering over Jaden. "The trial shall commence within the cycle. Prepare yourself, Ambassador." With that, she swept from the chamber, her attendants scrambling to follow, leaving Jaden in stunned silence. After a moment, his AI assistant Arya spoke through his earpiece. "Congratulations, Ambassador. You just set a new record, proposing marriage to an alien queen within 10 minutes of your first diplomatic meeting." "This isn't funny, Arya," Jaden hissed. "I need to fix this immediately." It was just a figure of speech. One of the remaining attendants approached him. "Ambassador, I am Grand Chancellor Zorix. I will guide you through the preparations for the binding trial. Your quarters have been prepared." "There's been a misunderstanding," Jaden insisted. "I wasn't actually proposing." "The Queen has accepted," Zorix stated flatly, as if that settled everything. "In 300 years, she has never accepted a binding offer. This is a momentous occasion for our empire. But I didn't make a binding offer. On Earth, we don't just casually propose marriage during diplomatic meetings." The Grand Chancellor regarded him with what might have been pity. "Intent is irrelevant in matters of royal protocol. The words were spoken and accepted. The binding trial will determine if the union is viable." He gestured toward the exit. "This way, Ambassador. Or should I say, royal consort candidate." As Jaden followed him through the corridors, his mind raced with potential diplomatic fallout. Would Earth blame him for this colossal misstep? Would this derail any hope of a peaceful alliance with the Arielum? And most pressingly, what exactly was a binding trial? "Arya," he whispered to his AI, "give me everything you can on Arielum marriage customs and this binding trial. And contact Earth Command. Tell them the situation has evolved in an unexpected direction." "Already compiling data," Arya responded. "An ambassador?" "Based on the reactions in that room, when the Queen laughed, I believe you may have accidentally accomplished what no diplomat has managed in centuries. You've made an impression." Jaden sighed deeply. That wasn't the impression I was aiming for. As they entered a luxurious suite clearly designed with alien ideas of human comfort, Zorix turned to him with an expression that Jaden couldn't quite read. Rest, Ambassador. Tomorrow, you begin the journey that will determine the future relationship between our worlds. The door slid shut behind him, leaving Jaden alone with the weight of accidental history on his shoulders. Grand Chancellor Zorix arrived precisely at what Jaden's devices translated as first light, though in the depths of space, all light was artificial. Accompanying him was a hovering mechanical orb that projected the image of a humanoid figure composed entirely of light. "This is the Royal Intelligence," Zorix explained. "It will explain the binding trial and serve as your guide throughout the process." The light figure bowed slightly. "Greetings, consort candidate. I am Rix-9, keeper of royal protocols and witness to all binding trials for the past 12 generations." Jaden, who had barely slept, rubbed his eyes. "Look, before we go any further, I really need to clarify that on Earth, what I said wouldn't be considered a marriage proposal. The time for clarifications has passed." Rix-9 interrupted, its voice gentle but firm. "The binding trial is a sacred tradition that predates even the founding of the Empire. It consists of a series of challenges designed to test compatibility, trust, courage, and diplomatic acumen. A holographic display materialized between them, showing what appeared to be an extensive flowchart with at least a dozen branches. Jaden's heart sank as he realized the complexity of what lay ahead. The trial begins with the ceremonial attiring, followed by the clarity sphere. Then, depending on the results, you will proceed through various challenges, including, but not limited to, the chaotic rift navigation, the mirror grove reflection, the public addressing, and finally, the soul declaration. Jaden's mouth went dry. "And if I fail these tests?" The light figure's expression remained unchanged. "Failure at any stage would indicate incompatibility between you, personally, and the Queen, and by extension, between your species. The diplomatic implications would be significant. So no pressure," Jaden muttered. "Indeed. Now, we must proceed to the ceremonial attiring." What followed was 2 hours of being measured, scanned, and eventually dressed in what had to be the most elaborate and uncomfortable outfit Jaden had ever worn. The base layer was a form-fitting suit that seemed to adjust to his body temperature. Over this went various pieces of ornamental armor, each embedded with crystals similar to those in the Queen's crown. The final touch was a cape that defied physics. It didn't hang, but rather floated around his shoulders as if suspended in water. "The attire establishes your status as a consort candidate," Rix-9 explained. "The crystals are attuned to your biological signatures and will change color to reflect your emotional state during the trials." "Great," Jaden said, noticing that the crystals were currently a sickly green color. "So everyone will know exactly how terrified I am." "Transparency is valued in the binding trial," the AI responded without irony. When they entered the grand ceremonial hall, Queen Valteria was already waiting. She wore an ensemble that made Jaden's outfit look modest by comparison. Layers of what appeared to be liquid metal formed a dress that continually shifted and reformed around her tall frame. Her crown had expanded, now framing her face with crystalline structures that pulsed with a calm blue light. Whispers filled the hall as Jaden approached. He was acutely aware that every aerial lum present could probably sense his anxiety through the now amber-colored crystals on his outfit. "Candidate Jaden," the Queen acknowledged him, her voice carrying through the hall without seeming to raise it. "Are you prepared for the clarity sphere?" Before he could answer, the floor between them began to transform. A perfect sphere of energy materialized, approximately 10 feet in diameter, glowing with an inner light that shifted between white and gold. "The clarity sphere will examine your intentions and core values," Rix-9 explained quietly. "It is not a test that can be passed through preparation or skill. It simply reveals what is." "That's what worries me," Jaden whispered back. Together, he and Queen Valteria stepped into the sphere from opposite sides. As soon as they were both inside, the ambient noise of the hall disappeared. They stood in perfect silence, facing each other across the sphere's diameter. The light intensified, and Jaden felt a strange sensation, as if something was gently rifling through his thoughts. He panicked briefly, trying to focus on diplomatic platitudes, peace, cooperation, mutual benefit. But the sphere seemed to bypass his conscious thoughts entirely, digging deeper. Images flashed through his mind. His childhood dream of exploring space, his genuine belief in finding common ground between different cultures, his fear of failure, his determination to prevent conflict between Earth and the powerful Arielum. There was embarrassment about his accidental proposal, but also a surprising undercurrent of curiosity about the Queen herself. Across from him, Queen Valteria stood perfectly still, but her crown was cycling through colors rapidly. Jaden caught glimpses of what might have been her thoughts. The burden of ruling an empire spanning multiple star systems, centuries of political maneuvering, the loneliness of a position where everyone was either a subject or a supplicant, never an equal. And beneath it all, a genuine desire to find new perspectives after centuries of stagnation. The light suddenly intensified to blinding levels, then receded. Outside the sphere, an ancient Arielum with skin like parchment stepped forward. "The clarity sphere has spoken," the elder announced. "There is discord, but also potential harmony. The trial may continue." The sphere dissolved around them, and the hall erupted in murmurs. Jaden released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Well, that was uncomfortable," he said without thinking. To his surprise, Queen Valteria's lips curved slightly. Indeed, being laid bare before one's subjects is never pleasant. She studied him with new interest. "You feared exposure of your accidental proposal, yet your deeper intentions toward peace are genuine." "Interesting." Before Jaden could respond, they were surrounded by attendants and ushered towards separate exits. "The initial ceremonial phase is complete," RIX-9 informed him. "Now comes the social test, the diplomatic feast." The feast was held in a massive hall with a transparent ceiling that offered a breathtaking view of the space station surroundings, a nebula glowing with blues and purples, occasionally shot through with golden streaks of distant stars. Jaden was seated at the high table alongside Queen Valteria, with various dignitaries arranged around them according to some complex hierarchy he couldn't begin to understand. The food, if it could be called that, was a challenge in itself. Plates of writhing tentacles garnished with glowing fungi were placed before him. Beverages changed color as they were poured, emitting faint wisps of rainbow-colored smoke. Each course was more alien than the last. "This is a delicacy from the ocean moons of Zythar," Queen Valteria explained as servants presented a dish that appeared to be moving in time with the ambient music. The flavor changes depending on the emotional state of the consumer. Jaden eyed it warily. "That sounds interactive." A hint of amusement crossed her features. "Your species does not have emotion-responsive cuisine. We have comfort food, but it doesn't comfort you back," he replied, cautiously taking a bite of the strange substance. To his surprise, it tasted like a complex blend of seafood and citrus, with an aftertaste of something entirely new. As the meal progressed, Jaden found himself growing more comfortable. The crystals on his attire had shifted to a calm blue, and he even managed to make a few of the dignitaries chuckle with his observations on interspecies dining etiquette. "Your adaptability is commendable," Queen Valteria noted, watching him attempt to eat something that resembled a floating jellyfish. "Most off-worlders refuse our cuisine entirely. On Earth, diplomats learn quickly that sharing food is the fastest way to build bridges," Jaden replied. "Though I admit, this is testing the limits of that philosophy." This earned him another rare smile from the Queen, causing several nearby dignitaries to exchange glances of surprise. Not everyone seemed pleased with the developing rapport. However, one dignitary in particular, whose elaborate attire suggested high rank, watched their interactions with thinly veiled disapproval. "High Sovereign," the dignitary eventually addressed the Queen, his voice carrying deliberately through the hall. "While this cultural exchange is entertaining, perhaps we should discuss the practical implications of binding our glorious empire to a species that has barely left its own solar system." The room fell silent. Jaden recognized the challenge for what it was, a political move to undermine the entire process. Queen Velteria's crown shifted to a deep purple. Lord Krav, your concern for the Empire's standing is noted. However, the binding trial is a matter of royal prerogative, not policy debate. Lord Krav bowed slightly, but his eyes remained cold. Of course, High Sovereign. I merely suggest that some traditions, however ancient, may benefit from modernization, particularly when the stakes involve our technological superiority and cultural purity. The tension in the room was palpable. Jaden realized this was more than just a diplomatic hiccup. There was genuine political resistance to the very idea of alliance with humans, marriage or otherwise. Before the Queen could respond, Jaden cleared his throat. If I may, Lord Krav, on Earth, we have a saying, stagnation is the enemy of innovation. The most advanced civilizations in our history were those that embraced cultural exchange rather than fearing it. Lord Krav's eyes narrowed. A convenient philosophy for the less advanced party. Perhaps, Jaden conceded. Or perhaps it's a universal truth that both our species might benefit from remembering. A murmur ran through the assembled dignitaries. Queen Velteria observed the exchange silently, her crown now shifting between purple and gold. The feast concludes, she announced suddenly, rising from her seat. Tomorrow, the chaotic rift navigation will test different qualities. Rest well, candidate Jaden. You will need your strength. As attendants led him back to his quarters, Jaden caught sight of Lord Krav in deep conversation with several other dignitaries there. Expressions grave. It was clear that the accidental engagement had political dimensions he hadn't anticipated. Arya, he whispered once alone in his quarters, I think I've stumbled into the middle of some kind of Ariel-lum political conflict. Based on the data I've gathered, there appears to be a conservative faction within the Empire that opposes any close alliance with Earth, his AI assistant confirmed. Your marriage proposal, accidental or not, has become a focal point for these tensions. Jaden sank onto the bed, which adjusted immediately to support his frame. Fantastic. So not only am I navigating an accidental engagement to an alien queen, but I'm also a pawn in her empire's internal politics. Look on the bright side, Arya suggested. The queen seems to find you. Interesting. Jaden threw a pillow at the AI's holographic projection. Not helping Arya. Not helping at all. The observation deck of the Ariel-lum royal vessel gleamed with polished surfaces that reflected the swirling colors of the chaotic rift outside. The region of space looked like a storm frozen in time. Streams of ionized gas twisted into impossible shapes, punctuated by pockets of gravitational distortion that bent light into prismatic shards. The chaotic rift is a natural phenomenon that occurs at the boundary between normal space and what your scientists might call a quantum foam anomaly. RIX-9 explained as Jaden stared out the viewport. Navigating it requires precise calculations, quick reflexes, and, most importantly, seamless coordination between pilots. And let me guess, Jaden said, already knowing the answer. The Queen and I will be piloting together? Correct. The binding trial uses the rift to test compatibility under pressure. Many potential unions have ended here. The AI's light form flickered briefly. Sometimes, quite literally. That's reassuring. Queen Velteria entered the observation deck, now dressed in a form-fitting flight suit that emphasized her height and alien grace. The crystalline crown remained, though reduced to a more practical circlet. Candidate Jaden, she greeted him. Have you ever piloted a spacecraft? I have basic certification for orbital shuttles, he admitted. Nothing like, whatever will be flying into that. He gestured toward the chaotic swirls outside. The skiff is semi-autonomous, she explained, leading him toward a smaller docking bay. It requires 2 pilots, one to navigate physical space, one to manage energy patterns. I will handle the latter, as it requires familiarity with Ariel-lum technology. The skiff turned out to be an elegant vessel about the size of a small yacht, its hull shimmering with the same material as the Queen's ceremonial dress. Inside, Two pilot stations faced a transparent hull section that would give them an unobstructed view of the rift. As they settled into their respective stations, Jaden noticed the control interface rearranging itself to accommodate human ergonomics. "That's considerate," he commented. "The vessel adapts to its pilots," Queen Voltaria explained. "A necessary feature when navigating the unpredictable." The skiff detached from the royal vessel with a subtle vibration. Jaden found the piloting controls surprisingly intuitive, similar enough to Earth designs to be familiar, yet clearly more advanced. "The objective is simple," the Queen continued. "Navigate through the rift to the marker beacon on the other side. I will maintain our energy shields and balance the quantum fluctuations. You will steer and control our speed." "What's the catch?" Jaden asked, sensing there was more. Her lips curved slightly. "The rift changes constantly. What appears to be a clear path may close in seconds. What seems like solid matter may be merely light. We must communicate effectively." The skiff approached the edge of the rift, and Jaden felt a subtle shift as they crossed some invisible boundary. Immediately, the controls became more responsive, almost skittish under his touch. "Ease your grip," Queen Voltaria instructed. "The rift amplifies input. Gentle corrections only." Jaden nodded, relaxing his hand slightly. The skiff responded better, gliding smoothly into the swirling currents of the anomaly. For the first few minutes, things went relatively well. Jaden navigated around the larger distortions while Voltaria maintained their shields, occasionally murmuring directions like 40 degrees starboard or reduce velocity by half. Then they encountered their first serious challenge, a writhing knot of plasma that suddenly unfurled directly in their path. "Pull up," Voltaria commanded sharply. Jaden yanked the controls upward, perhaps too forcefully. The skiff lurched, narrowly missing the plasma, but spinning into a gravitational eddy. "Too much." Voltaria's crown flashed red as she frantically adjusted the energy output. "We're caught in a gravity well." The skiff began to tumble control, systems flickering. Jaden fought with the increasingly unresponsive controls. "I can't stabilize," he called out, an edge of panic in his voice. "Which button reverses the thrusters?" "The blue crystalline node to your left," she responded, her own hands dancing across her console. "Press and hold while pulling back on the main control." Jaden did as instructed, and the skiff shuddered violently before slowly regaining stability. They hung in space, both breathing heavily from the near disaster. "That was..." Jaden began. "Poorly executed," Voltaria finished, but without the coldness he might have expected. Instead, there was a hint of self-criticism in her voice. "I should have warned you about the gravity well sooner. And I should have been more gentle with the controls," he admitted. "Shall we try again? Maybe with a bit more coordination?" Something shifted in her expression. Surprise, perhaps, at his willingness to acknowledge the joint failure rather than assign blame. "Yes," she agreed. "Let us establish a rhythm. I will count down before major directional changes. 3 pulses means urgent action required." With their new system in place, they advanced deeper into the rift. The view was simultaneously terrifying and beautiful. Sheets of energy rippled across their path like cosmic curtains. Gravitational lenses bent starlight into impossible shapes around them, and occasional bursts of quantum foam blossomed like flowers made of light. As they navigated a particularly challenging section, Jaden found himself relaxing into a natural rhythm with Voltaria. They began to anticipate each other's actions. He would adjust course just as she reinforced shields in that sector, or she would modulate energy flow at precisely the moment he needed more power for a maneuver. "You adapt quickly," she observed during a relatively calm stretch. "Most species require multiple attempts before achieving this level of synchronization. Maybe humans and Arielum aren't as different as you thought," Jaden suggested, carefully guiding them through a narrow gap between energy currents. "Perhaps," she conceded. Then, more quietly, "It has been some time since I piloted with a partner. As queen, fewer permitted such proximity." "That sounds lonely," Jaden said before he could stop himself. There was a long pause, filled only by the hum of the skiff systems. When she spoke again, her voice had lost some of its royal formality. The crown isolates by necessity. Every interaction becomes political, every word measured for its potential consequences. She adjusted a control, her eyes fixed on the readings. Even this, the binding trial, will be dissected by courtiers and politicians for generations. Jaden considered her words as he navigated around a swirling vortex. On Earth, there's a saying, heavy is the head that wears the crown. I guess some experiences are universal, even across the stars. A particularly violent energy surge suddenly rocked the skiff, throwing off their course. Warning signals flashed across both their consoles. Gravitational shear approaching. Voltaria called out. We cannot avoid it. Brace for turbulence. The skiff plunged into what looked like a waterfall of light. Control became nearly impossible as forces pulled at the vessel from multiple directions. Jaden fought to keep them oriented, but the controls weren't responding. The navigational system is failing, he shouted over the groaning of the hull. I can't tell which way is forward. I can see the patterns, Voltaria replied, her crown blazing through colors faster than Jaden could track. Trust my directions. Left. Now down. Hard right. Jaden surrendered to her guidance, following each command instantly despite his instincts, sometimes screaming otherwise. The skiff twisted and turned through the maelstrom, systems flickering on the edge of failure. One final push, Voltaria called out. Full power to forward propulsion on my mark. Now, Jaden slammed the thrusters to maximum. The skiff shot forward like a bullet, breaking free of the gravitational shear and bursting out into relatively calm space. The beacon they had been seeking pulsed steadily ahead of them. Both slumped in their seats, the intensity of the experience leaving them momentarily speechless. The skiff drifted gently toward the beacon, its systems beginning the automatic docking sequence. We did it, Jaden finally said, a grin spreading across his face. That was exhilarating, Voltaria finished, and to his surprise, she was smiling too, a genuine expression that transformed her usually regal features into something more approachable, more real. I haven't had to trust someone like that in centuries, she admitted. It was refreshing. The crystalline circlet on her head had settled into a warm gold color, matching the crystals on Jaden's flight suit. Eric's Nine's voice came through the communication system. Chaotic rift. Navigation. Successfully completed. Compatibility rating. Exceptionally high. Please prepare for return to the royal vessel. As the skiff began its journey back, Jaden found himself stealing glances at the Queen. For the first time since this bizarre adventure began, he wondered if there might actually be something to this binding trial after all. The royal vessel's observation deck was quiet and dimly lit when Jaden arrived that evening. Most of the court had retired, leaving only the essential crew and a few silent guards at their posts. To his surprise, Queen Voltaria stood alone at the viewport, gazing out at the stars. Her posture was different when she thought no one was watching, less rigid, shoulders slightly relaxed. The crystalline crown glowed with a gentle blue light that illuminated her profile. Your Majesty? Jaden called softly, not wanting to startle her. She turned, and for a brief moment before her royal mask slipped back into place, Jaden caught a glimpse of something vulnerable in her expression. Candidate Jaden, she acknowledged him. You should be resting. Tomorrow's trials will be demanding. I could say the same to you, he replied, moving to stand beside her at the viewport. Do Arielum not need sleep? We require less than humans, but yes, rest is necessary. She gestured at the vast expanse of space before them. Sometimes, however, the quiet moments are worth the sacrifice of sleep. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching distant stars pulse against the black canvas of space. A nebula in the distance cast faint purple light across the deck. You handled yourself well in the rift today, Voltaria finally said. Few outsiders adapt so quickly to our technology. Thank you. Jaden hesitated, then added, I had an excellent co-pilot. Something close to a smile touched her lips. Perhaps, though I must confess, there were moments when I was uncertain of our success. You hit it well. A queen cannot show fear, she stated simply, especially not before her potential consort. The word consort hung between them, a reminder of the strange circumstance that had brought them together. About that, Jaden said carefully, I feel I should explain what happened when I made my proposal. Valteria turned to face him fully. You mean when you accidentally offered marriage as a diplomatic solution? There was definitely amusement in her voice now, and Jaden couldn't help but smile sheepishly. Yes, that monumentally awkward moment. On Earth, such statements are often made in jest or out of desperation when negotiations are going poorly. And were you desperate, Ambassador Jaden? She asked, her third eye focusing on him intently. Terrified is more accurate, he admitted. You're quite intimidating when you want to be. To his surprise, Valteria laughed. The same genuine laugh from their first meeting, but softer now, more intimate in the quiet space. Few have ever been so honest with me. Her crown shifted to a warm amber. It is refreshing. If we're being honest, Jaden ventured, may I ask why you accepted? Surely you didn't take my blunder seriously. Valteria was quiet for a long moment, considering her words carefully. The Arielum Empire has existed for millennia, she finally said. We have achieved technological marvels, expanded across star systems, mastered sciences your people have yet to discover. And yet, she looked back to the stars. We have begun to stagnate. The same ideas circulate endlessly. The same political factions fight the same battles. She turned to him again. Then comes humanity, young, chaotic, unpredictable. A species that should have destroyed itself a dozen times over, yet somehow continues to survive, to adapt, to grow. And here you stand, an ambassador who accidentally proposes marriage to an alien queen, then faces the consequences with surprising grace. I wouldn't call my panicking grace, Jaden interjected. You underestimate yourself, she countered. Many would have collapsed under the pressure of the trials. You've adapted. That interests me. Their conversation was interrupted by a soft chime from the communication system. Your Majesty, Eric's Nine's voice stated, the preparations for tomorrow's Mirror Grove reflection are complete. The elders request your presence for the final calibrations. Valteria straightened, her regal bearing returning instantly. Inform them I shall arrive shortly. She turned back to Jaden. You should truly rest now. The Mirror Grove tests different aspects of compatibility, ones that cannot be navigated with quick reflexes alone. As she moved to leave, Jaden called after her. Thank you for explaining, and for the company. She paused at the doorway, the crystalline crown catching the starlight. The binding trial reveals truth in many ways, candidate Jaden. Some planned, some unexpected. With that, she departed, leaving Jaden to contemplate the stars and the strange path his diplomatic mission had taken. The Mirror Grove turned out to be an ancient chamber deep within the royal vessel, where thousands of crystal formations grew from floor to ceiling like petrified trees. Each crystal surface reflected light in peculiar ways, sometimes showing distorted images of the viewers, sometimes displaying what appeared to be scenes from other times or places. This grove was transplanted from the Arielum homeworld centuries ago, X-9 explained as Jaden followed him through the glittering forest. The crystals are psychoreactive. They respond to thought patterns and emotional states, reflecting not just physical reality, but inner truths as well. As they ventured deeper into the grove, the reflections began to shift more dramatically. Jaden glimpsed fleeting images of Earth in one crystal. His childhood home, the academy where he trained as a diplomat, the spaceport where he'd embarked on this mission. The Mirror Grove is perhaps the most intimate of the binding trial tests, X-9 continued. It will reveal core fears, deepest aspirations, and true nature. There is no way to deceive the crystals. They see through conscious thought to the underlying self. Jaden swallowed nervously, and everyone will see everything. Only you, the queen, and the grove keeper will witness the full reflections. Others present will observe only the crystal resonance patterns, the colors and intensities, not the specific content. That was small comfort. The thought of having his innermost thoughts and feelings exposed before an alien queen he barely knew was disconcerting at best. They emerged into a circular clearing at the heart of the grove. Queen Valteria was already there, wearing a simple white robe that contrasted starkly with her usual elaborate attire. Her crown was reduced to a thin circlet, the crystals currently a subdued lavender. Several elders stood at a respectful distance around the perimeter. "Candidate Jaden," she greeted him, her voice softer than usual in the resonant space. "Are you prepared?" "As ready as I'll ever be," he replied honestly. One of the elders stepped forward, an ancient aerialum with translucent skin that revealed the slow pulse of a triple-chambered heart. The reflection begins. Step to the center stones. Jaden and Valteria moved to stand on two flat crystal plates in the middle of the clearing, facing each other across a distance of perhaps 10 feet. The elder raised gnarled hands, and the surrounding crystals began to pulse with inner light. "Close your eyes," Valteria instructed quietly. "The first reflection is always intense." Jaden did as she suggested, feeling a strange vibration rising through his feet from the crystal beneath. When he opened his eyes moments later, the grove had transformed. The space between them was filled with swirling images, three-dimensional projections playing out scenes from both their minds. Jaden saw himself as a child, staring up at the stars with wonder. Then the image shifted to show him being mocked by colleagues after a diplomatic failure early in his career. Another shift revealed his private fears of Earth's leaders condemning him for his accidental proposal of becoming a cautionary tale taught to future diplomats. But what caught him by surprise were the reflections from Valteria's mind. He saw a young aerialum child being fitted with her first crown, a solemn ceremony where the small crystalline structures were painfully grafted to her scalp. He witnessed her alone in royal chambers that echoed with emptiness, advisors and servants withdrawing with deep bows, but never meeting her eyes. He glimpsed her standing before her council, advocating for change while ancient ministers shook their heads in disapproval. The images began to merge and intertwine, creating composite scenes. Jaden's determination to forge peaceful connections blending with Valteria's desire to lead her people toward a new era. His fear of failure intermingling with her fear of eternal isolation. The reflections show rare alignment, the elder observed. Disparate beings, similar cores. Valteria's eyes met Jaden's across the swirling images. "Your fears are not what I expected, human. You fear personal disgrace less than you fear failing those who depend on you. And you," Jaden replied softly, "fear being forever surrounded yet always alone." Her crown flickered briefly to a deep blue before stabilizing. The burden of sovereignty. The images shifted again, now showing aspirations rather than fears. Jaden saw his hope for a peaceful alliance between Earth and the Aerialum Empire, technological and cultural exchange that would benefit both species. Valteria's reflections revealed her dream of an empire that evolved rather than merely endured, that found new purpose beyond maintaining its ancient glory. As they stood witnessing each other's inner worlds, something unexpected happened. The crystals throughout the grove began to emit a harmonious tone, rising in pitch and volume until the entire chamber vibrated with it. The swirling images between them coalesced into a single shared vision. Earth and Aerialum ships in formation, representatives of both species working side by side, a future neither had fully imagined alone. "Resonance!" exclaimed the elder, taking a step forward. "The grove acknowledges compatibility of vision." Around the perimeter, the other elders murmured among themselves. Jaden caught fragments of their conversation, unprecedented for an off-worlder, strongest response in generations. The vision faded gradually, and the crystal song diminished to a faint hum. Jaden felt dizzy, as if he'd just experienced something profound but couldn't quite grasp its full meaning. The mirror grove has shown favor. the elder announced formally. The trial continues with elevated status. As they were led from the grove, Jaden noticed that Valteria walked closer to him than before, her usually perfect posture slightly relaxed. "What does elevated status mean?" he asked quietly. "It means," she replied, her voice equally low, "that the conservative faction will find it much harder to interfere now. The Grove's judgment carries ancient weight, even for those who oppose our arrangement." Was that normal? What happened in there? Her crown shifted to a thoughtful blue-green. No, the resonance phenomenon is rare even between aerial pairs. Between different species, it is unprecedented. Before Jaden could ask more questions, they emerged from the grove into a wider corridor where a large delegation awaited them. News of the grove's response had apparently spread quickly. Eric's 9 materialized beside them. The public addressing is next, a formal presentation before representatives of the 13 systems. You must speak of your intentions for the Union. Jaden felt a flash of panic. What am I supposed to say? This whole thing started as an accident. Perhaps, Valteria said beside him, her voice carrying a hint of amusement. But the grove suggests it was a fortunate one. The public addressing took place in an enormous amphitheater with hovering platforms arranged in concentric semicircles, each bearing delegates from different worlds within the Arielum Empire. The atmosphere was tense with anticipation. Clearly, word of the unprecedented Mirror Grove resonance had spread. Jaden and Valteria stood on a central platform, elevated above the assembly. He was once again in ceremonial attire, though he noted that the crystals embedded in his clothing had been upgraded to larger, more elaborate formations that mirrored Valteria's crown more closely. Citizens of the 13 systems, Valteria's voice projected effortlessly through the vast space. We present to you candidate Jaden of Earth, who has completed the Clarity Sphere, navigated the Chaotic Rift, and received the Mirror Grove's blessing. Today, he addresses you directly, that you may know the one who may become royal consort. All eyes turn to Jaden, thousands of alien gazes from dozens of species that comprise the Arielum Empire. He swallowed hard, acutely aware that his performance here could affect not just his own fate, but potentially relations between Earth and this vast interstellar power for generations to come. People of the Arielum Empire, he began, grateful for his diplomatic training. I stand before you not as I expected to. I came seeking a trade alliance and found myself in a binding trial. This earned a ripple of what might have been laughter from some sections of the audience. But sometimes the most meaningful journeys begin with unexpected steps. He spoke of Earth's history, its struggles and triumphs, its diversity of cultures and perspectives. He spoke of humanity's enduring fascination with the stars and the dream of peaceful contact with other intelligent species. Throughout his address, he sensed Valteria watching him closely, her crown shifting through approving shades of gold and amber. The Mirror Grove showed me something I hadn't fully understood before, Jaden continued. Both our civilizations stand at crossroads. Earth looks outward, seeking its place among the stars. The Arielum Empire looks inward, seeking renewal after millennia of achievement. Perhaps together, we might find paths that neither could discover alone. The assembly listened in attentive silence, and Jaden began to believe his words were having a positive effect. Then, from a platform near the center, a familiar figure rose. Lord Krav, his elaborate attire now augmented with symbols of political office. Grand Ambassador, he addressed Jaden with elaborate courtesy that couldn't mask his underlying hostility. Your words are well crafted. Yet I wonder, when you proposed this union, did you understand our traditions regarding the translation of royal intent? Jaden hesitated, unsure what trap was being laid. I admit I did not. As I suspected, Lord Krav turned to address the assembly. This human, by his own admission, proposed a binding without understanding its significance. How can he represent human interests to our empire when he does not comprehend our most basic protocols? Murmurs spread through the assembly. Jaden felt a chill of apprehension. Before he could respond, Krav continued. "Allow me to assist with a proper cultural exchange," he said with false graciousness. In the Arialum binding tradition, the proposer must pledge allegiance to the crown before all other loyalties. "Is this something you are prepared to do, Grand Ambassador? To place Queen Valteria's interests above those of your homeworld?" The question was a masterful trap. If Jaden said yes, he would be betraying his duty to Earth. If he said no, he would be rejecting the binding trial itself. Jaden began, but found himself at a loss for words. Krav smiled thinly. Perhaps the Grand Ambassador would benefit from a demonstration of proper protocol. He gestured to an attendant who stepped forward with a small device. "This will translate my words precisely into human standard language, so there can be no misunderstanding." The attendant activated the device, which projected a holographic text in Earth Standard as Krav spoke in the formal Arialum tone. Jaden read the translation with growing alarm. It contained phrases like unconditional submission and renunciation of prior allegiances. When Krav finished, he looked expectantly at Jaden. "Now, Grand Ambassador, please repeat these words to Her Majesty, that all may witness your sincere commitment." Jaden looked to Valteria, whose expression remained carefully neutral, though her crown had darkened to a deep indigo. The assembly waited in tense silence. "I cannot speak those words," Jaden finally said, his voice firm despite his internal turmoil. "Not because I lack respect for Queen Valteria or the Arialum tradition, but because they would require me to forsake my responsibility to Earth. I came seeking alliance, not subjugation." Gasps and murmurs erupted throughout the amphitheater. Lord Krav's expression transformed into one of triumphant vindication. "You see," he declared, "the human acknowledges his inability to fulfill the most basic requirement of the binding. I move that this trial be suspended immediately as incompatible with." "Enough!" Valteria's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. The assembly fell instantly silent. She stepped forward, her crown now pulsing with a deep, steady crimson. "Lord Krav, your assistance with cultural exchange is noted. However, the translation you provided contains archaic phrasing not used in binding ceremonies for over 12 generations." Krav's composure faltered slightly. "Your Majesty, I merely sought to ensure proper adherence to tradition." "Indeed." Valteria's third eye fixed upon him with unsettling intensity. "Then you will, of course, be able to explain why the text you provided includes the submission clause of the Third Dynasty, which was explicitly rejected by the Renewal Conclave 400 years ago." Lord Krav paled visibly. "Scholarly oversight, Your Majesty. The translation archives are vast. They are," Valteria agreed coldly. "Yet somehow you selected phrases that would specifically force candidate Jaden to choose between his duty to Earth and the continuation of the trial. A remarkable coincidence." The assembly had grown deathly quiet, all attention focused on the unfolding confrontation. "The public addressing is concluded," Valteria announced. "The Council of Elders will review today's proceedings. Candidate Jaden, you will be escorted to the preparation chamber for assessment." As royal guards moved to lead him away, Jaden caught a final glimpse of Valteria's face. Though her expression remained regal and composed, there was something in her eyes, concern, perhaps, or apologetic recognition of the trap that had been sprung. In the preparation chamber, a sparse room with only a few seats and a large viewing screen showing the now empty amphitheater, Jaden paced anxiously. "This is bad, isn't it?" he asked ARIX-9, who had accompanied him. "The situation is complex," the AI responded. Lord Krav's maneuver was politically sophisticated. He could not directly challenge the Mirror Grove judgment, so instead he created a scenario where you would be forced to violate protocol. But the Queen caught him using outdated texts. "Yes," which prevents immediate dismissal from the trial. "However, the damage is done. Many delegates will remember only that you refused to pledge allegiance, not the circumstances that made such a pledge inappropriate." Jaden ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "So what happens now?" Before ARIX-9 could answer, The door slid open to admit a small procession of elders, their ancient faces. Unreadable. Candidate Jaden. The lead elder addressed him formally. A grave irregularity has occurred during the public addressing. The council must deliberate on whether the trial can proceed. The elder held up a hand to forestall Jaden's protest. Until a decision is reached, you are confined to your quarters. The binding trial is suspended. As guards escorted him through the corridors, Jaden caught snippets of conversation from passing aerialum. The news was spreading rapidly. The human candidate had refused the allegiance pledge. The trial was in jeopardy. Political factions were already maneuvering to capitalize on the disruption. Back in his quarters, Jaden found Arya waiting, her holographic form pacing anxiously. "I monitored the entire proceeding," she said without preamble. "Earth Command is requesting an immediate update." "Tell them it's complicated," Jaden replied bitterly, sinking onto a couch that adjusted to support his slumping posture. "I've either ruined humanity's first major interstellar alliance or narrowly avoided becoming a puppet consort in an alien empire. Based on my analysis, it appears Lord Krav deliberately sabotaged the ceremony," Arya observed. "The question is, why? What does he gain by preventing this union?" Jaden considered the question. "ARIX. 9 mentioned conservative factions within the Empire. Maybe Krav represents those who oppose any close alliance with Earth." "Possible," Arya agreed, though there could be more personal motivations as well. The speed with which he executed this plan suggests he was prepared well in advance. Before they could speculate further, a soft chime announced an incoming communication. The room's central display activated to show Grand Chancellor Zorix. "Ambassador Jaden," he greeted formally. "The situation has become politically delicate. Lord Krav has formally petitioned the Council of Systems to invalidate the binding trial on grounds of ceremonial impropriety. His faction is demanding your immediate departure from Aerialum space." "And what does the Queen say?" Jaden asked. Zorix's expression grew troubled. "Her Majesty is bound by certain protocols in matters of disputed binding trials. She cannot intervene directly while the Council deliberates." "So that's it? One manipulative politician gets to derail everything?" "Not quite," Zorix replied with a hint of secretive purpose. "There are alternative protocols, rarely invoked, but available in extraordinary circumstances." Jaden leaned forward. "What kind of alternatives?" "I'm not at liberty to elaborate further through official channels." Zorix glanced meaningfully to his left. "However, I believe you may receive a visitor shortly who can provide more perspective. Until then, Ambassador." The communication ended abruptly. "That was cryptic," Arya commented. "And definitely off script," Jaden agreed, feeling a flicker of hope. "I think we just got a hint that the Queen's faction isn't giving up without a fight." Less than an hour later, the environmental system in Jaden's quarters emitted a subtle hiss. A section of the seemingly solid wall shimmered and became transparent, revealing a hidden passage. Through it stepped Queen Velteria herself, without attendants or guards, wearing a simple dark robe that muted the glow of her crystalline crown. "Your Majesty." Jaden stood quickly, surprised by her clandestine arrival. "Please," she said quietly, glancing back at the passage as it sealed seamlessly behind her. "Formal titles are unnecessary when using the Sovereign's secret corridors. I didn't realize royal quarters came with escape tunnels. They are ancient," she explained, moving further into the room. "Constructed during the succession wars, when assassination was a common political tool. Few remember they exist." Her crown pulsed with muted colors, indicating suppressed emotion. "I apologize for Lord Krav's deception. He has long deposed my reforms, but I did not anticipate he would resort to such public manipulation." "It's not your fault," Jaden assured her. "But I'm guessing my refusal to recite his loyalty pledge has complicated things?" "Yes and no." Volteria gestured to the seating area, and they both sat. The Mirror Grove's blessing carries significant weight. Krav could not challenge it directly, so he sought to force you into a position where you would violate protocol, giving him technical grounds for objection. It worked, Jaden said grimly. Partially, Voltaria corrected. He has created a procedural impasse, but not an irreversible one. I believe we can still salvage the binding trial, and with it, the alliance between our peoples. Jaden studied her with newfound appreciation. The queen before him now was not merely the remote sovereign he'd first encountered, but a strategic political operator fighting for her vision of the empire's future. What's the plan? He asked. Voltaria's expression became focused, her crown shifting to a determined blue. The binding trial has one final test, the soul declaration. Traditionally, it comes after all other challenges are complete, but there's an ancient provision for invoking it early in cases of political interference. And this soul declaration would override Lord Krov's objections? It could, she confirmed. The declaration is considered the purest expression of the binding trial's purpose. It takes place before the ancestral conclave, the oldest living aerialum and a direct conduit to our collective history. Their judgment supersedes even the Council of Systems in matters of royal binding. So we bypass the politicians entirely, Jaden said, beginning to understand. Precisely. However, her voice grew more serious. The soul declaration is not without risk. It will subject both of us to the most intense scrutiny possible. Our thoughts, intentions, memories, all lay bare before the ancestral conclave. There can be no deception, no diplomatic half-truths. Jaden absorbed this information. You're willing to expose yourself to that? As queen, Voltaria's crown flickered with what might have been vulnerability. I believe the future of my empire depends on breaking our isolation. Lord Krov and his faction would keep us frozen in ancient glory while the galaxy changes around us. She met his eyes directly. But I must ask if you are willing. The process will be invasive by human standards. Will it help secure the alliance between Earth and the aerialum? If successful, yes. The declaration would establish a binding so fundamental that even the most conservative factions would be compelled to honor it. Jaden considered for barely a moment. Then I'm in. What do we need to do? For the first time since he'd met her, Voltaria looked genuinely surprised. Most beings require more persuasion before agreeing to have their minds essentially turned inside out. Most beings aren't accidental diplomats already neck-deep in alien marriage trials, Jaden replied with a wry smile. Besides, the Mirror Grove already showed me your thoughts, and you saw mine. What's one more round of cosmic mind reading? Voltaria's crown shifted to a warm golden hue, and she almost smiled. Your adaptability continues to impress, Jaden of Earth. She rose gracefully. We must move quickly. Lord Krov will have spies watching for any official preparations for the declaration, so we will use the old ways. She moved to an unadorned section of wall and placed her palm against it. Symbols illuminated beneath her touch, and a hidden compartment slid open to reveal what looked like two small crystals, similar to those in her crown, but unattached to any setting. These are remembrance stones, she explained, taking them carefully. They synchronize thought patterns and prepare the mind for the declaration. We must each carry one until the ceremony. She handed one to Jaden. It was warm to the touch and seemed to pulse faintly in rhythm with his heartbeat. Keep it with you at all times, she instructed. Even when you sleep. It will attune itself to you. Will anyone notice I'm carrying it? The stones are keyed to our biological signatures now. They'll be invisible to scanning technology and imperceptible to others. She moved toward the hidden passage, which had reappeared silently. I must return before my absence is noted. Tomorrow, when the council convenes to consider Krov's petition, the ancestral keeper will interrupt the proceedings to announce the soul declaration has been invoked. And then, she said, pausing at the threshold of the secret corridor, we place the future of both our peoples in the hands of beings older than your entire civilization. With that sobering thought, she slipped into the passage, which sealed seamlessly behind her. Jaden looked down at the small crystal in his palm, wondering exactly what he'd just agreed to. Arya, he called to his AI assistant. I think I just went from accidental fiancé to willing participant in an alien soul bond ritual. Based on available data, Arya replied with what sounded suspiciously like amusement. This actually represents an improvement in your diplomatic standing. Morning arrived with a formal summons to the council chamber. Jaden was escorted by an honor guard that seemed more like a detention detail, their expressions stony and alert. The remembrance stone remained hidden in an inner pocket of his ceremonial attire, a comforting warmth against his chest. The council chamber was a vast circular room with tiered seating rising on all sides. Hundreds of Arielum dignitaries filled the seats, their conversations creating a susurrus that died away as Jaden was led to a solitary position at the center of the floor. Queen Valteria sat on an elevated throne on the far side, her expression regal and remote, giving no indication of their secret meeting. Lord Croft stood at a speaker's podium, his elaborate attire now augmented with additional insignia that Jaden guessed represented his formal role in these proceedings. He looked smugly confident. The Council of Systems convenes to address the petition regarding the human candidate's violation of binding protocols, announced a senior official. Lord Krav, as petitioner, you may present your case. Krav began a measured speech about the sanctity of tradition, the importance of proper protocol, and the dangers of hasty alliances with species who did not understand Arielum culture. His words were carefully chosen to sound reasonable, while painting Jaden as either deliberately disrespectful or hopelessly ignorant, neither quality desirable in a potential royal consort. Jaden stood silently, feeling the weight of hundreds of alien gazes. He noticed, however, that Valteria seemed unusually calm, her crown glowing with a steady blue light that suggested she was waiting for something. And so, honored council, Krav was concluding with theatrical gravitas. I respectfully submit that this unprecedented and irregular binding trial be terminated immediately. The human candidate has demonstrated his fundamental incompatibility with our. A thunderous sound interrupted him, a single strike on what appeared to be an ancient metal gong at the rear of the chamber. All heads turned. Standing by the gong was the most ancient Arielum Jaden had yet seen, their skin so translucent it was nearly transparent, showing internal structures that pulsed with faint blue light. Instead of a crown, their entire scalp was a crystalline formation that covered their head like a living helmet. The ancestral keeper, someone whispered loudly enough for Jaden to hear. The ancient being moved forward with surprising grace, the assembly parting respectfully before them. When they spoke, their voice was like layers of whispers overlapping. The soul declaration has been invoked. A collective gasp rippled through the chamber. Lord Krov's expression transformed from smugness to shock, then fury. Impossible, he protested. The declaration requires mutual consent and preparation. The human cannot possibly. The ancestral keeper raised one long-fingered hand, silencing Krov instantly. The remembrance stones have been shared. The ancient way has been honored. They turned slowly, surveying the chamber. Who challenges the right of declaration? Krov seemed caught between outrage and caution. To challenge the ancestral keeper directly would violate deep cultural taboos, yet he clearly hadn't anticipated this development. This is irregular, he finally managed, his tone carefully modulated. The council has not completed its deliberation regarding the protocol violation. The declaration supersedes council deliberation. The keeper replied simply. It has been thus for 12,000 cycles. Queen Valteria rose from her throne, drawing all eyes. As sovereign, I acknowledge the invocation of the soul declaration and submit myself to the judgment of the ancestors. The keeper turned to Jaden, ancient eyes studying him with unnerving intensity. And you, human, do you understand what you have accepted? Jaden felt the remembrance stone warm against his chest as he replied. I accept the soul declaration and submit to the judgment of the ancestors. A murmur ran through the assembly. The keeper nodded once, then raised both arms. The conclave will convene at the hour of passage. All other matters are suspended. Without waiting for response, They departed as they had come, leaving a chamber buzzing with astonished conversations. Lord Krav stood frozen at his podium, his carefully orchestrated political maneuver suddenly derailed. His eyes met Jaden's across the chamber, burning with barely suppressed rage. As Jaden was escorted from the chamber, he caught a glimpse of Valteria. Though her expression remained composed, her crown briefly flashed a triumphant gold before settling back to royal blue. The first round, it seemed, had gone to their side. The hour of passage turned out to reference a specific astronomical alignment, when the space station's orbit brought it directly between two significant stars in the Ariel system. Jaden spent the intervening hours in a state of nervous anticipation, studying what little information ARIX-9 could provide about the Soul Declaration. The ritual dates back to the earliest days of the Ariel civilization, the AI explained. Before space travel, before even the unification of their homeworld. It was originally used to verify the intentions of peace envoys between warring clans. And now it's used for royal marriages? Jaden asked. The application has evolved, but the principle remains consistent, establishing trust through complete transparency. For the Ariel who evolved as a partially telepathic species, truth verification became a cornerstone of their diplomatic and social systems. What exactly should I expect? Records are limited, ARIX-9 admitted. What is known is that the ancestral conclave will use ancient technology to create a shared consciousness space where thoughts cannot be hidden. You and the Queen will experience each other's core memories, defining beliefs, and fundamental intentions. Jaden felt a flutter of anxiety. Everything, my entire life, laid out for inspection. Not chronologically complete, but emotionally complete. The experiences that shaped you, the values that define you, the motivations that drive you, yes, those will be fully accessible. Before Jaden could process the implications of this, his quarters chimed to announce visitors. The door slid open to reveal a solemn procession of elders clad in ceremonial robes. It is time, Candidate Jaden, announced the lead elder. The stars aligned for the declaration. He was led through corridors he hadn't seen before, deeper into the ancient core of the space station. The architecture changed subtly, less sleek technology, more organic curves and crystalline structures embedded directly into the walls. They eventually arrived at a set of massive doors that appeared to be made of some form of petrified wood, carved with intricate spiraling patterns. Beyond lies the ancestral chamber, the elder informed him. You will enter alone. Follow the path of light. The enormous doors swung open silently, revealing a cavernous space lit by bioluminescent formations that cast a blue-green glow over everything. The floor was inlaid with a spiral pattern that began at the doorway and wound toward the center of the chamber, where a raised dais held what appeared to be two reclining chairs made of the same crystalline material as the mirror grove. Jaden followed the spiral inward, noting the gallery of observers seated in tiered balconies around the periphery of the chamber. He spotted Lord Krav among them, his expression tightly controlled but eyes burning with thwarted ambition. Reaching the center, Jaden found the ancestral keeper already present, standing beside the crystalline chairs. Queen Valteria approached from the opposite side of the chamber, wearing a simple white robe similar to what she'd worn in the Mirror Grove. Her crown was at its most minimal, a thin circlet with just 7 crystals that pulsed with a calm, steady light. The candidates come before the conclave, the keeper announced, voice echoing strangely in the chamber. Who witnesses for the human? To Jaden's surprise, Grand Chancellor Zorix stepped forward from among the observers. A witness for Jaden of Earth. Who witnesses for the sovereign? An elegant elder, Ariel moved to stand opposite Zorix. A witness for Valteria, 7th queen of the unified dynasty. The keeper nodded, satisfied. Remove the remembrance stones. Jaden reached into his robe and withdrew the crystal, which had grown noticeably warmer. Valteria did the same. They handed the stones to the keeper, who placed them in recessed holders at the head of each crystalline chair. The declaration requires truth absolute, the keeper intoned. Once begun, It cannot be halted until completion. Final consent is required. I consent, Voltaria stated firmly. All eyes turned to Jaden. This was his last opportunity to back out, to avoid having his mind essentially turned inside out before alien witnesses. He thought of Earth, of the potential alliance this strange process might secure, of the glimpses he'd already seen of Voltaria's true self beneath her royal persona. I consent, he said, voice steady despite his racing heart. Then it begins. The keeper gestured for them to take their positions on the crystal chairs. As Jaden reclined, he felt the chair conform to his body, almost embracing him. Crystalline structures extended from the sides, curving up to frame his head without quite touching it. Opposite him, Voltaria was similarly positioned, her eyes meeting his with what might have been reassurance. The keeper moved to stand between them, raising arms that suddenly seemed to glow from within. Through memory, through thought, through spirit aligned, let truth be found in minds combined. The remembrance stones began to pulse rapidly, their light synchronizing and growing brighter until Jaden had to close his eyes against the glare. He felt a strange sensation, as if his thoughts were becoming tangible, flowing outward from his mind like water, seeking its level. Then came the merger, Voltaria's consciousness meeting his in a space that was neither physical nor entirely mental. Images, emotions, and memories cascaded between them in a torrent too fast to process individually, yet somehow comprehensible as a whole. He saw Voltaria as a child, the weight of royal expectation already heavy on her small shoulders. The painful integration of her first crown crystals, permanent neural interfaces that would mark her as royal for life. The lonely years of intensive education, separated from others her age. The succession ceremony after her predecessor's death. The crushing responsibility descending on her as the crown interface fully activated, connecting her to the collective wisdom and burden of all prior rulers. She, in turn, witnessed his life on Earth, his childhood fascination with the stars, his determination to become a diplomat after witnessing a territorial dispute nearly escalate to war in his hometown, his training, his failures, his small triumphs. The mixture of terror and excitement when he was selected for the Ariel mission, knowing it could define his career and potentially his species' future. Deeper still they went, beyond mere experiences to core values and fundamental beliefs. Jaden's conviction that understanding could bridge even the widest cultural divides. Voltaria's determination to guide her empire toward renewal rather than stagnation. His fear of failing those who trusted him. Her fear of remaining forever isolated by her position. Time lost meaning in this shared consciousness. What might have been minutes or hours passed as their minds continued to intertwine, revealing layers of self that neither had fully articulated even to themselves. At some point, Jaden became aware of the ancestral keeper moving around them, observing the luminous patterns forming in the air above their reclined forms, visual manifestations of their mental communion. Other ancient Ariel had joined the keeper, their crystalline head structures glowing as they processed the shared consciousness display. Finally, gradually the intensity began to ebb. The flood of shared thoughts slowed to a trickle, then ceased entirely. Jaden opened his eyes, feeling strangely hollow yet complete, as if he had been emptied and refilled with something both familiar and new. Voltaria was already sitting up on her chair, her crown cycling through colors too rapidly to track before settling on a deep, contemplative blue. Their eyes met across the space between them, and Jaden knew with absolute certainty that they now understood each other in a way few beings ever could. The ancestral keeper stood at the center of the dais, arms outstretched. The chamber had fallen into complete silence as all awaited the verdict. "We have witnessed the declaration," the keeper announced, their layered voice resonating through the chamber. "We have seen truth absolute between Voltaria of Ariel and Jaden of Earth. Their minds have touched in places no deception can survive." The keeper turned slowly, addressing the entire assembly. The human came seeking alliance between worlds. The queen sought renewal for an empire grown too comfortable in its own reflection. Both found more than they anticipated. Lord Krav rose from his seat, clearly struggling to maintain composure. Ancestral One, with all due respect, the ritual confirms only compatibility of mind, not adherence to protocol. The violation of ceremonial requirements is irrelevant. The keeper cut him off with surprising sharpness. The declaration reveals intention. Jaden of Earth never sought to undermine our traditions. He spoke in earnest of diplomatic marriage without understanding our customs. Yes, but his core intention was alliance and peace. The queen recognized this truth and accepted the proposal in the same spirit. The keeper's crystalline head structure began to glow with increasing intensity. More significantly, the declaration has revealed a rare synchronicity between these two beings. Their core values, innovation balanced with preservation, individual autonomy within collective responsibility, exploration guided by wisdom. These complementary patterns are precisely what the binding trial was designed to identify across the millennia. The ancient being raised their arms higher. The conclave finds the binding valid and the candidates worthy. Let the final union commence. A ripple of astonishment passed through the assembly. Lord Krav sat heavily, his political gambit thoroughly defeated. Around him, dignitaries began to murmur excitedly, the mood in the chamber shifting from tension to celebration. The keeper turned to Jaden and Valteria, who had both risen from their chairs. The ancient ways have been honored. The modern protocols have been satisfied. What remains is your final, conscious choice, made with full knowledge of each other. Valteria stepped toward Jaden, her expression more open than he had ever seen it. Her crown glowed with a warm golden light. Jaden of Earth, she said, her voice carrying easily through the silent chamber. Having shared mind and memory, knowing you as few have ever known another being, I affirm my acceptance of our binding. I choose alliance between our peoples and partnership between ourselves. It was Jaden's turn. Standing before this alien queen whose mind he now knew as intimately as his own, he found himself at a crossroads he had never imagined. What had begun as a diplomatic blunder had transformed into something profound, a connection that transcended species and bridged worlds. In Valteria's mind, he had seen her genuine desire for renewal, her vision of what their alliance could mean for both civilizations. Valteria of Arielum, he replied, surprised by the steadiness in his voice. Having witnessed the truth of your intentions and shared the depth of your thoughts, I affirm my commitment to this binding. What began as an accident has become a choice, one I make freely for the benefit of both our peoples and the future we might build together. The ancestral keeper nodded once, then placed a hand on each of their shoulders. By the authority vested in the conclave since the first dynasty, I declare this binding complete. Let it be recorded that Earth and Arielum are now joined through their representatives, that their fates shall henceforth be intertwined. Throughout the chamber, the crystalline structures embedded in the walls began to pulse with light, creating a cascade of illumination that spread outward in concentric rings. The assembled dignitaries rose as one. Even Lord Krav reluctantly, standing in acknowledgement of the conclave's judgment. The union is recognized. The assembly intoned in unison. Earth and Arielum bound as one. In the days that followed, the space station transformed from a tense political arena to the site of elaborate celebration. News of the successful binding spread throughout the 13 systems, and delegations arrived from distant worlds to witness this unprecedented alliance. Even the conservative factions, led by a notably subdued Lord Krav, were compelled to acknowledge the legitimacy of the union after the ancestral conclave's unequivocal endorsement. Jaden found himself in the strange position of being both a diplomatic representative and royal consort, a dual role with no precedent in either human or Arielum history. His communications with Earth Command had been met first with disbelief, then cautious optimism as the implications of the alliance became clear. The technology transfer agreements are being finalized now, he explained to Voltaria as they walked through a quiet garden chamber designed to mimic the landscape of the Arielum homeworld. Earth is particularly interested in your sustainable energy systems and faster-than-light communication technology, and we shall receive cultural and biological diversity in return, she replied, her crown glowing with pleased amber tones. Your planet's artistic expressions alone will provide new perspectives for generations, not to mention your species' remarkable adaptive capacity, which our scientists are eager to study. They paused before a liquid metal fountain that shaped itself into continuously evolving forms. Since the Soul Declaration, there was an easy comfort between them, the natural result of having shared consciousness so completely. I've been meaning to ask, Jaden said, watching the hypnotic movements of the fountain. What happens now? With us, I mean. I know the political alliance is secure, but the personal aspect of this binding concerns you. Voltaria completed his thought, a habit they'd both developed after the declaration. Not concerns exactly, but it's uncharted territory. On Earth, diplomatic marriages historically involved certain expectations. Her crown shifted to a thoughtful blue. The Arielum view the binding as a union of purpose first, with personal dimensions developing according to the individuals involved. We have shared mind and spirit through the declaration, but physical and emotional connections remain ours to define at whatever pace feels appropriate. Jaden nodded, relieved by her understanding. So we have time to figure it out. Indeed, though I must confess, her crown briefly flashed a warm rose color. I find your company increasingly agreeable. He smiled at the formal phrasing that barely concealed a more personal sentiment. Likewise, Your Majesty. I believe we are well past the need for titles, Jaden. Force of habit, he replied with a shrug. I'm still getting used to being a consort instead of just an ambassador. You are both, which is precisely why this arrangement has such potential. She touched one of the liquid metal shapes, causing it to reform around her fingers before flowing back into the main circulation. My advisors are already preparing for your official introduction to the 13 systems. We will tour key worlds together, demonstrating the tangible reality of our alliance. And I'll need to bring you to Earth eventually, Jaden added. My parents are going to have quite a story to tell at family gatherings. Their son who went to negotiate a trade deal and came back with an alien queen as a partner. Voltaria's eyes crinkled with amusement. I look forward to experiencing Earth's customs firsthand, though I suspect my appearance may cause some adjustment difficulties for your populace. They'll adapt, Jaden assured her. Humans are good at that. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Grand Chancellor Zorix, who approached with a formal bow. Your Majesty, Consort Jaden, forgive the intrusion. The Terran delegation has arrived early and requests an audience. Earth sent a delegation? Jaden asked, surprised. I wasn't informed. A recent development, Zorix explained. They dispatched their fastest vessel upon receiving confirmation of the binding's success. Voltaria and Jaden exchanged glances. This was the first test of how their respective worlds would interact directly, the true beginning of the alliance they had forged. We shall receive them together, Voltaria decided, her crown settling into the formal blue configuration she adopted for official functions. In the grand reception hall, as they made their way through the station, Jaden felt a mixture of nervousness and pride. Whatever came next would be uncharted territory for both their species, but they would navigate it together. The grand reception hall had been transformed to accommodate both Arielum ceremony and human diplomatic protocol. Earth's flag stood alongside the imperial standard of the 13 systems. The Terran delegation, consisting of 5 senior diplomats and several scientific advisors, waited nervously, clearly awed by the alien splendor surrounding them. Voltaria and Jaden entered side by side, causing the Earth representatives to straighten perceptibly. Jaden recognized the lead diplomat, Director Helena Voss, Earth's most experienced negotiator. Director Voss, he greeted her with a formal nod. Welcome to the Arielum domain. Ambassador Jaden, she replied, her professional composure only slightly betrayed by her widened eyes as she took in Valteria's alien majesty. Or should I say, Consort Jaden, your reports were thorough, but seeing is believing. May I present Queen Valteria, sovereign of the Arielum Empire, guardian of the 13 systems. Jaden performed the introduction smoothly. And my binding partner in the alliance between our worlds. Valteria inclined her head regally, her crown shifting to a welcoming gold hue. Representatives of Earth, you are honored guests in our domain. The binding between myself and Jaden marks the beginning of what I trust will be a long and prosperous association between our civilizations. Director Voss performed a careful bow, clearly rehearsed. Your Majesty, Earth is honored by this historic alliance. We bring formal ratification of the preliminary agreements Ambassador Jaden has negotiated, along with proposals for our first joint ventures. Excellent, Valteria replied. We shall review them together, as partners should. As the formal reception continued, Jaden observed the interaction with a sense of wonder. Two species from different stars, with different evolutionary paths and histories, finding common ground. It was everything he had hoped to achieve as a diplomat, though the path had been far stranger than he could have imagined. At one point, he caught Valteria's eye across the room. Her third eye winked at him briefly, a subtle, private acknowledgement of their shared journey. From accidental proposal to genuine partnership, they had forged something unprecedented. Later that evening, they stood together on an observation deck, watching as Earth's diplomatic vessel prepared to depart, its crew laden with the first technological manuscripts of the knowledge exchange. Beyond it, the stars stretched into infinity, full of possibilities. Do you regret it? Valteria asked suddenly. Your unintentional proposal that started all this. Jaden considered the question, thinking of the bizarre journey from that moment of diplomatic panic to this point of genuine connection. Not for a second, he answered honestly. Though I might suggest a revision to diplomatic training manuals. Be careful what you joke about in alien throne rooms. I believe that falls under the heading of learning from experience, she replied, her crown shimmering with amusement. At least it makes for a good story, Jaden said. The accidental proposal that changed two civilizations. Indeed, Valteria turned to face him fully. Though I should confess something, now that our alliance is secure. What's that? Her crown shifted to a mischievous violet. I knew perfectly well you didn't intend a formal proposal when you suggested diplomatic marriage. Jaden blinked in surprise. You did? But then why? Because I saw an opportunity, she explained. Our empire needed something to break centuries of stagnation. Your species needed a pathway to the wider galaxy. And you, her expression softened. You were different from the calculating ambassadors and power seekers I usually encounter. You spoke from genuine desire for cooperation, even when flustered. So you deliberately misinterpreted my blunder. I recognized its potential, she corrected gently. And the Mirror Grove confirmed my intuition was correct. We are indeed compatible in ways neither of us anticipated. Jaden shook his head in amazement. All this time, I thought I'd made the diplomatic error of the century. Instead, you made the diplomatic breakthrough of the millennium. Her crown glowed with warm gold light. Sometimes, Jaden, the most significant paths forward begin with unexpected steps. As Earth's ship disappeared into the vast darkness of space, carrying the first fruits of their alliance, Jaden reflected on the strange sequence of events that had led to this moment. A desperate joke, a queen's strategic misinterpretation, and now a partnership that spanned worlds. So, he said, turning back to Valteria with a smile, what's our next adventure? Her crown sparkled with anticipation as she replied, we have 13 star systems to introduce you to, diplomatic protocols to rewrite, and 2 civilizations to bring together. I would say our adventures are just beginning. As they stood side by side, human and Arielum, ambassador and queen, looking out at the stars that had once separated their worlds but now connected them, Jaden couldn't help but think that his diplomatic career had taken the most unexpected and rewarding turn possible. All because of a moment of panic, a queen's laugh, and the words that had changed everything. Wait, was that an offer? All right, I accept.